Strange but true stories. Tales from the light side, the dark side, and the other side. I'm Steve White. Growing up, I loved reading about people's encounters with ghosts. I was always fascinated by the supernatural to the point that I wanted to visit the places where these things happened. I wanted to have one of these ghostly encounters of my own, and I always wondered how I would react, really, if I ever did make contact with someone on the other side. I remember one time my parents and I were in Charleston, South Carolina on a little vacation. We were going to do a lot of the touristy things, but the one thing I wanted to see was a house in Charleston that I had read about, where the family described a woman in white wafting down the stairs. Now, of course, every house in Charleston sports a ghost, but this was way before the days of ghost tours that you can take now, and I'm fairly certain my parents wouldn't have taken me on a ghost tour even if they had been around. Anyway, we found the house, and it being a private residence, it wasn't open for tours. So I had to settle for just standing outside the door, reading some historical plaque that didn't even mention the most interesting thing about the house: the ghost. My career as a ghost hunter stifled before it could even get started. Oh well, today's story is a bit more interesting than my non-encounter, and it comes from an area not too far from Charleston. This story was submitted to us by a viewer and subscriber to SBT. If you have a story like this you would like to send to us, there's information at the end of the video. Enjoy. The Ghost Attached. This occurred around 2015 in South Carolina, about 20 minutes north of Charleston in a town called Goose Creek. I was still in high school at the time, and nearly every day after class I would spend the rest of the afternoon with a group of friends at the Strip, which was the local nomenclature for a particular rundown apartment complex. My friend lived in one of these units, and her back porch became the default hangout spot after school. One particular day, we somehow got onto the subject of ghosts and hauntings when my friend Allie claimed that a demon haunted not only her apartment, but her family in general. I can't recall all of the details, and unfortunately I'm no longer in contact with Allie to clarify, but from what I remember, she claimed that her uncle, who lived with her in the apartment, basically inherited this entity from another family member who supposedly lived in a haunted trailer in rural Georgia. The story went that this family member dabbled in the occult and accidentally conjured this entity. Supposedly, anyone that visited the family member would go back home and start experiencing paranormal activity for a few days themselves. This family member passed away, after which Allie's uncle became the, let's call it the home base for this entity, which then led to the haunting in the apartment that we were hanging out in every day. Allie said that shortly after her uncle moved in, they started to hear knocks on the wall in the apartment. They saw shadows where there shouldn't have been shadows. Each of them had vivid nightmares, which was not the case prior to her uncle moving in. Also, objects in the house moved, or they just disappeared outright. You know, fairly standard ghost fare. She also told me, and I will admit this spooked me, that there were a few nights she'd wake up to what sounded like someone whispering directly into her ear. The activity became routine enough that her folks nicknamed the demon Chuck. If anything weird happened, Chuck was their scapegoat. Now, I have always enjoyed reading and researching the paranormal, but the story she gave me at the time sounded a little too fantastical to me, like the start of a bad creepypasta almost. The other guys in the group didn't seem to fully believe her either, and being the jerks that we were, we tried to egg Chuck on. Hey, Chuck, where are you at? Hey, Chuck, throw this Pepsi can across the room. Yo, Chuck, give Eddie a wedgie. Just being stupid, goofy teenage kids. Allie told us if we didn't stop, Chuck might attach to one of us and follow us home. We didn't listen to her. So a little after that, it started getting dark, and we decided to split up and head home. Later on that night, I'm watching TV at my house with my mom. We were in our living room when I saw something moving in my peripheral vision. I looked up to see a perfectly silhouetted shadow of a man against the wall. The way it was cast, it appeared like there should have been someone standing in the doorway. It was about, 5 feet 8 inches. It looked almost as though a man strutted up to the living room with his hands on his hips, looked around for a second, and strutted away from the doorway. I looked over at my mom, who was still looking at the TV, and she didn't seem to have noticed what I had just witnessed. But after a few minutes passed, she calmly said to me, "I saw it too." She followed that up, half jokingly, that if I was playing with Ouija boards, she was going to kick my butt. Dinner was ready about an hour later, and we were getting ready to sit down at the dinner table when we heard a crash from the other side of the house. I went to check it out, and I found a picture frame on the floor. So, it had fallen off the wall, and you're thinking, coincidence, right? Well, here's the kicker. The picture didn't fall straight down the wall and shatter under where it was hanging. Nope, it was on the opposite side of the room from where it had been hanging. So it had gone from one wall to the other side of the room, hit the other wall, and then fallen to the floor. In essence, it was thrown or hurled across the room. And there was nobody else in the house but me and my mom. I cleaned it up, and I tried not to think too much about it. I went back to the dinner table about 10 minutes later, and the house went back to being quiet. Later on, I did my homework and watched a little more television before heading off to bed. I laid down on my pillow and tried to drift off to sleep after what had been a really weird afternoon and evening. That was when I heard a tapping on my door. Thinking it was my mom wanting to ask me something, I told her to come on in. No response. That was weird. Even if she changed her mind, she would have said something to me. Oh well, I didn't want to overthink it. Plus, I was tired, so I rolled over and tried to drift off again. A few minutes later, another knocking on my bedroom door, but this time, it was much, much louder. I got up and opened the door expecting to see my mom, remembering why she had knocked a few minutes before. But no, there was no one there. That was unnerving, but what could I do? I'm in high school. I'm not going to run to my mommy and climb in her bed like I'm some 5-year-old. Call the cops? Hello, officer. Yes, I would like to report a ghost just knocked on my bedroom door, and when I opened it, there wasn't anything there. Oh, and the ghost flung a picture across the room earlier this evening. Hello, officer. You there? Yep, that wouldn't have gone over well. So at this point, I climbed back into my bed and tried for the third time to get to sleep as soon as possible, so I didn't have to think about it. 20 minutes later, I was nearly asleep when I heard the door open and then close by itself. Now I was starting to get spooked. I just put my head under the covers and tried to ignore it, to fall asleep. Despite all this, I am finally able to drift off for just a bit and get a little sleep. But I woke up again with the sound of intense scratching in the wall right behind my head. I'm not talking about the sound you might hear if a a mouse gets in the walls, or a squirrel even. No. This was definitely the scratching that you might hear if somebody's dragging their nails down the wall. I sat up and looked around, bleary-eyed and flustered, when I saw what I can only describe as movement in the dark of my room. The best way I can put it is if you could imagine the empty space in the room rippling, like very light fabric in a light breeze, in a very slow, wispy fashion. I sat there trying to figure out what the heck I was looking at when my closet door handle started jiggling and thumping. At this point, I'm not even scared anymore. I just really wanted to sleep, so I mustered as much courage as I could, and I said loudly as I could, "Chuck, I know that's you. Please stop. I'm trying to sleep. You made your point. I'm sorry." And to my surprise, the wispy stuff in my room faded away, and my door creaked open and then closed on its own again. The rest of the night it was quiet, and I was able to get some sleep, thank goodness. Since that point, I haven't ever had anything else happen. When I saw Allie the following day, I told her my experience, at which point she handed me the most drawn-out "I told you so" I'd ever heard in my life. This has been another strange but true story, sent to us by a subscriber to SBT. So tell us what you thought of this story in the comments below. And if something similar has happened to you, we'd love to hear about it. In fact, if you have any strange paranormal occurrence that has occurred to you or somebody you know, send your story in an email to strangebuttruestories2@gmail.com. Once again, strangebutTrueStories2@gmail.com. Subscribe if you haven't already, and sign up for notifications so you know when the next video drops to the channel. Thanks for watching this video. Be safe, everybody. I'm Steve White. Until next time.